Welcome to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with a wide range of music personalities, from rock and roll Hall of Famers to Grammy winners and today's rising stars. Recorded from the Old Rock House in St. Louis, Missouri, here's your host, Aaron Perlut.
Welcome back to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Perlut, and we are coming to you live on tape from here at the Old Rock House in St. Louis. And today I'm really excited because I'm joined by actually two friends of mine who are authors of an amazing new book, Stephanie Abbajay and Dominic Vaiana, and it's called A Bar in Toledo, and it's all about an infamous music club that Stephanie actually has a very close tie to. So guys, thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us. We're excited.
Great to be here.
So, Stephanie, I know this is a family story for you. Give us kind of a thumbnail of the book and what it's about.
So the book is called The Bar in Toledo, as you said, and it's about my father's nightclub in downtown Toledo called the Peppermint Club. And he owned it from 1963 until 2012. And he brought rock and roll to Toledo, and then he brought country and western to Toledo. And the book tells the story of his life in the bar business. And then with Dom, as my writing partner, he discovered that his partners were made men in the mob. So it's sort of a family story of Duane Abbajay's nightclubs and what he did to achieve the success. And what we thought was just a great nightclub turns out to be a front for the mob.
And it goes beyond just being kind of a famous rock and roll club and country music club, because there's a song that actually, an infamous song that kind of made the club, it gave it its lore well outside of whether it's Toledo or Ohio, but right. I mean nationally, right?
Right. So the bar had two lives. It was hugely popular as a rock and roll nightclub. And then it kind of hit the skids in the 70s, and my father pivoted. He saw the writing on the wall, and he pivoted to country and western. And one night, a guy came in on the Greyhound bus at the bus depot a block away and witnessed a scene at the bar of a man and a woman breaking up. And he went home and he wrote a song called Lucille, which then was performed 2 years later by Kenny Rogers. And it goes, a bar in Toledo across from the depot. And that was written in and about my dad's bar. So then the bar, which had hit the skids, it now had a second life as a famous country and western bar. And it just took off. Yeah,
and of course it's got that famous hook, you picked a fine time to leave.
That's right. Lucille. That's right. Yeah.
So Dominic, when Stephanie kind of brought you into this project and you guys started digging in, like, she said you were kind of the one who was able to realize that the FBI was kind of tailing her father for years and years and years. And you're like, do you know this was going on?
Yeah, so we can back up a little bit. So originally we wanted to pitch this as a TV show, right?
Yeah. And
we knew there was some kind of elements of like a great classic all-American tale. There's music, there's some shady characters, blah, blah, blah. But then, COVID hit and everything kind of hit a wall as far as TV and production stuff went. But I was still like infatuated with this story. So I said, let's write a book about it. She said, sure, you have free reign to research and interview whoever you want. I'm going to collaborate, because Stephanie at the time had, a few pages of a memoir that was I had started a memoir like 15 years ago, and I pitched it to a bunch of agencies, and they're like, not great. And then I wrote an article about my father for the American Interest magazine in Washington, D.C., and then Dom was working at No Coast at the time, and his production partner read the article and loved it, and they said, we need to turn this into a TV show. So they took the article, turned it into a pitch for a TV show, got a little bit of love, and then COVID hit, as Dom said, and then it just kind of died. So then Dom said, I feel like there's more to this story, so let's collaborate on a book. And I was like, here you go. So yeah, through this like Freedom of Information Act, like essentially all these FBI records are public access. You can just literally Google names of people and FBI, and you can pretty much find whatever you want. And I just Googled Duane Abbajay, went down the rabbit hole of Google, and very clearly and blatantly, he was a front man for the mob for his nightclub. And there's a ton of background about how he got roped into this and to what extent he was involved. But suffice to say, his business partners were not the traditional, golly gee, 60s suburban type people. They were killers. They were part of the most ruthless mob syndicate in America at the time.
Yeah, I just thought my dad's golfing buddies had wildly colorful names like Johnny Freddy and Whitey Bassessi and Nicky Scott. It turns out these were made men in the mafia. And I honestly had no idea until Dom was like, Stephanie, you know these guys were in the mob, right? And then there's the FBI reports. Dom found out that our family was under surveillance pretty much my entire life, which I had no idea. So it was eye-opening, to say the least.
And I was skeptical at first because, like, the story is cool, but I was like, do you want to, expose as part of your family, which is not my decision. But Stephanie thought that,
yes.
this is all gone and past by now, so it's not
and
really
it's
a
public
dangerous
record,
situation.
so it's, why not? If you're going to tell a story, you might as well tell the truth.
Yeah.
Because the story of Duane Abbajay, up until my knowledge of the FBI and mob stuff, was just like, this is a great guy, first generation American, one of 16 children born to Syrian immigrants, hard scrabble life in 30s and 40s Toledo, pulls himself up by the bootstrap, becomes a huge success. Well, there's a little bit more to it.
He
than
had
that.
some help.
He had some help. Whether he wanted it or not, it sounds like. And a lot of it, we don't really know the truth, because the last time I interviewed Duane was 7 years ago. And I didn't know any of this then, so I really only have Duane's version, and he did not share any of the mob stuff.
The candy-coated version.
Exactly. And my mother died in 86, so I don't have her version. I don't know what she knew. She presumably had to know something, right? I mean...
Sure. It was kind
of
of
cash.
It was an open secret, it seemed like.
Yeah, it was the worst kept secret in Toledo. Everyone knew about it. So...
By the way, you should know that these four flies that are surrounding us, they have a lease with an option to buy here.
Excellent.
So we got to
That
just kind of let
explains
them,
it. Okay.
don't kill them.
That's fine. Okay.
So let's take a step back. When you first talked to me about the book, you told me that the way that the Peppermint Club came into your nuclear family was that it was actually run by your uncle, who was kind of running it into the ground, and your mother asked your father to, hey, can you step in and help your brother out and take over this club, right?
So this was 1962, and my father was one of 11. My grandmother had 16 children, 11 survived, so he was number 10 of 11. And his older brother had this nightclub, and it was called the Peppermint Club, and it was going under. And my father owned a construction company at the time, and he was very successful.
And there's no mob in construction either, so...
So it turns out that he met these guys in the construction business. But anyway, so Uncle Donnie, this was his nightclub, and it was going under, and he owed everybody money. And my father's mother, who we call Situ, spoke very little English, broken English, called Duane. He was married to his second wife at the time, had a little baby. You have to take over Donnie's failing nightclub. The name is mud in town. We can't have the Abbajay name dragged through the mud. You have to help Donnie. You have to bail him out of this. So Duane, who was married with a baby, brand new house, starting the Norman Rockwell, middle class life, bails his brother out of the nightclub. And we're not quite sure if it was $15,000 or $50,000 or $70,000. There's differing accounts, but pays off his debts, bails him out, and then shuts it down, cleans it up, turns it around, and reopens it as the Peppermint Club. Immediately starts booking the Everly Brothers, Fats Domino, Chubby Checkers, Jerry Lee Lewis, huge names.
Yeah, it was kind of like a who's who of pop and rock at the time.
And they had not been to Toledo before that, so he brought them in. He got a house band. The place became incredibly popular, incredibly famous right off. And his thinking, what he told my mother, was that he was going to have it for a year, get it up and running, then sell it, and then be done with it. But he started having a lot of fun and a lot of money and probably a lot of other things. And
well, I would imagine if he was in business with the mob, you want to get out, and they're like, you know what? You've done a pretty nice job of taking something that was worthless and turning it into a valuable commodity.
Yeah.
We don't want you going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then there's also, the part where, here's a kid that grew up with not a lot of money, working class. He's in construction, which is it's tough work.
Yeah. Didn't go to college.
He's in Toledo, and all of a sudden he's rubbing elbows with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
He's hanging out with rich people. I mean, who could blame him for wanting to stick with it, right?
Exactly.
It's like he got intoxicated by the fun and the fame and the money and everything else that comes with that lifestyle, and unfortunately told his wife, I'm all in.
We're gonna stay, yeah.
And you talk about you talk about these mob guys coming to your home, and they had trunks full of stuff, right?
On any given Saturday or Sunday, maybe a Tuesday afternoon, somebody would pull up in the driveway, Cadillac, pop the trunk, and then one day it would be silk dresses, one day it would be high-heeled shoes, another day it would be fluffy stuffed animals with AM, FM radios in their tummies. Very often they'd come to the house with giant black suitcases and plop them down on the dining room table and open them up, and it'd be full of turquoise jewelry one week or gold jewelry another week. Cases of lobster tails, the Coke and Pepsi truck delivered right to our house. I mean, it was crazy. Like, my father didn't go to a store for 25 years. He bought all of his clothes and shoes from the trunks of Cadillacs. Where this stuff came from, we'd never asked, obviously.
So when you see a movie like Goodfellas,
I'm like, that's
like my life.
Exactly. Or Casino, when he's going through his closet, my dad's closet looked like that. Like, just silk shirts, polyester and silk shirts, and then matching pants and then matching loafers, just like candy colored, it was crazy. And
as Stephanie is kind of sharing this reality of her life with you, you must have been like,
I'm thinking
holy
something's
shit,
not right.
That's not normal.
What the hell is
like, this isn't just like normal nightclub owner stuff.
Right.
There's like has to be something else here, and of course there was.
Yeah.
So 62, your dad takes it over from his brother, pivots the bar, becomes a rock and roll club, and it does very, very well. But then, I mean, this story is a story of redemption.
Right.
Several times over, because that was kind of redemption number one.
Redeeming his family name. Exactly.
And the club itself.
Right.
But then the bar falls on hard times again, right?
But from 63 to like 70, it was the bomb. It was the shit. It was the place in Toledo to be. And then early 70s, like, disco was becoming popular. Rock and roll was kind of waning. And the club kind of lost its footing. There was also urban flight. People were leaving downtown Toledo. People weren't coming down anymore. So from like 71 to 73 or 4, it was just kind of muddling along. It was just kind of, and so that's when he borrowed money again from people, we're not sure who, turned it into the Country Palace. And it didn't take off right away. It was not really popular. And then the song Lucille came out, and then it was hugely popular. And from then on, it was the #1 spot in pretty much that part of the Midwest for country western music.
And do you think initially it wasn't popular because Toledo, Ohio isn't actually like a hotbed of country music?
That's right. Yeah. And I think it was an odd thing to have a country western bar in Toledo. It was before the country western station
or even just
came
the
out.
state of Ohio.
Right, exactly. And he was a little ahead of the curve with it. He
a lot of his pitch was that, this is a place for, like, when him and his business partners would, call these record labels, like, this is a good place for your artists to stop on the way to Detroit. This is a huge venue with amazing acoustics. We've had, Jerry Lee play here with all these people. Why not come here and make an extra buck on the way? So it was kind of a unique spot in Toledo. It wasn't just like some rinky-dink bar, right?
That's
It was like a legit venue.
Yeah, you could go from Detroit to Chicago and go right through Toledo. Also, the port at that time was still really popular, so there were huge cargo ships coming in. So sailors were a big part of the crowd there. And also the drinking age in Canada was low.
Like
it was
12,
hot. Well, it was. I think
roughly.
It was lower at that time. It was lower.
18 in Toledo.
That's right. It was 18 in Toledo, but it was 21 in Michigan and Canada.
College kids would come down.
So college kids would come down. So it was hugely popular. And I think the law changed in like 83.
So, but the club, again, just like it had a who's who of rock and roll stars in the 60s, it was Dottie West and
Charlie Rich, Charlie Pride, Waylon Jennings,
Mel Tillis,
Willie Nelson. I mean, just you name it, and they played there. It was crazy.
And these are personal friends of, like, he's hanging out with them, he's drinking with them. They're not just like, a passive.
Yeah, no, they're coming early to play because they want to hang out with Duane and hang out with the
club. Just a charismatic
club.
dude too. He knows how to.
Yeah, he was a quiet gentleman. Like when you see him, he looked a little bit like Omar Sharif, pretty, exotic and dark. But he was a very quiet guy. He wasn't this, hey man, he wasn't a glad-handing impresario. He was pretty quiet and pretty low-key.
So when you were going through this process, you learned a lot of things that were pretty heartbreaking for you at the same time.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the things you learned about your family that really were difficult for you as you went through this kind of learning experience.
So we interviewed all the relatives we could who would want to talk to us on the record, and I learned from my sister. I thought I was very close with my mother, and I was, and my sister was too. But my mother told my sister things that she never told me about.
And this
her
is your older sister.
This is my older sister. Yeah, I'm the youngest of 5. And the things my mother was aware of in terms of my father's infidelity was just heartbreaking. And I guess I didn't realize how hard it was for her to be married to someone like Duane.
Especially someone who's out until 3 a.m.
Exactly.
every night of the week owning a bar.
Exactly. And I also uncovered letters that my mother had written to my brother, who was at college at the time, and she and my father had separated briefly and then gotten back together. And in her letters to my brother, she talks about tailing my father, following him because she didn't believe that he was being faithful. And she's telling my brother all these things in the letter, and he's a sophomore in college. And it was just heartbreaking that she was sharing this with Bobby, and I just didn't know about it. I don't know why, I don't know what her relationship with Bobby was, but she felt obviously that she could share it with Mary and Bobby. It was really kind of heartbreaking.
Do you think she maybe felt like you were too young to be able to just wrap your arms around something like that?
Yeah, they were both away at college at the time, and I was home, and maybe I was just busy with band and basketball and boyfriends and just out and about, and she just felt that she couldn't share it with me. I don't know, it was interesting, but then she died in '86, so I can't ask her.
Now, and you also have a half-brother, and I mean, that's kind of part of the mystery unraveled as well,
Yeah,
correct?
that's a big part. That's a pretty sizable part of the book, and he was very forthcoming in talking about his life and his relationship to Duane. He was, my father got his sister's best friend pregnant and then refused to acknowledge that the child was his. This was when he was going off to college. Turns out he took a paternity test. David Abbajay is his. He was forced to legally adopt the child, but never really paid child support, never really supported David and his mother. And this is also something that I didn't realize. I didn't realize how hard it was for David and his mother to grow up in Toledo and see the success of not just Duane Abbajay, but his family as well, and in the paper and at church, and could see us, but we didn't know about them.
And so,
Crazy.
So it was during this process of writing the book that you actually found out that you had a half-brother?
No, I found out that I had a half-brother when my mother was literally on her deathbed. The day before she died, she said, "Girls, I got to tell you something. You have a half-brother. His name is David. You've never met him." And then she told the story, and we just thought, oh, Mom's on morphine. She's not speaking clearly. And then 6 months later, at Mom's memorial service, David came. So I was 22 at the time, 21 or 22. So he and I have a good relationship, but I didn't realize the trauma that he went through until we were writing this book and we interviewed him. And he was very forthcoming about the problems that he's had because of the lack of love from his father. Not just love, but Duane completely ignored him when he was a child. So
and that's just one instance of kind of the duality of Duane.
The duplicity and the duality, yeah.
Because, on one hand, he's like, at his kids' football games and like he's sitting home, he's passing the meatloaf. And on the other hand, he's with killers eating dinner, or he's neglecting his forgotten son. So he's really, I don't want to say he's like dual personality, but he had these kind of two people inside him that could never really get along, and they manifested themselves in weird, odd, and often hurtful ways.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Two things can be true simultaneously. And there's a lot of people who refuse to believe these things about Duane Abbajay because they only saw the guy who would give you the shirt off his back, and it was a single mom. He would buy her furniture and her kids' clothing. And then there was the Duane Abbajay who ignored his firstborn son, didn't support them at all, who cheated on his wife. So both of those Duanes are true. They're both Duane. So you're right. It's a story of the dualness of people.
Which I'm sure was not uncommon at that time for a middle-aged guy who really can't like talk about things the way people might today, and kind of had to bottle up all for, the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
And it worked to that extent, but also God knows how much he took to the grave that we don't even know about.
Oh, I know. It's crazy. But he did have a pathological need to be needed by women, we think, because he had so many affairs and so many girlfriends.
But the thing with that, it was never like, barflies, like young girls. He would always gravitate towards like single mothers and like people like his age.
Yeah.
Like, he wanted to like be like a father figure, which is ironic because he couldn't be a father to his long lost son, and often to you guys because he's just not there.
Yeah.
So he kind of had to fill that gap by buying diapers for other women's kids, which is, it's so bizarre.
It is,
strange.
Dom called it a Rust Belt psychodrama, and I think that really encapsulates what it is. And it's funny because we will never really know.
No.
So we have to do the best we can.
So I know that, when I stopped drinking and started writing music, I used music therapeutically as a way to kind of come to grips with the dysfunction I grew up with. As you were kind of going through writing this and researching it, Was there a part of this that was very therapeutic for you, or was it just painful to kind of go through these, some memories, but some were just discoveries? Or was it a little bit of both, therapeutic and painful? And
it was a little bit of both. I would say that it was more painful than therapeutic. There are things that Dom found out that I remember a couple times Dom calling and saying, listen, just so you know, and he would send me the FBI report and I would read it about my father, and it's just like, it was stunning. And I would literally just have to walk away and just sort of, wrap my head around it. And then learning things about my mother when she was a child that I didn't know, like she was beaten and she was homeless. I didn't know any of that until I interviewed my cousins. So it was really painful. And I feel badly that I didn't try harder when my parents were alive to know them. But again, I think it's a generational thing. You don't talk about, like, I feel like my kids know everything about my childhood.
Our parents didn't tell you who they would vote for. They didn't tell you their age.
No, they didn't ask how school was that day. They didn't give a shit. Like, right? They just kept these things to themselves, and then you discover that.
Generationally, it's a different. They also spent time with. They were much more tribal too. Whereas, if your parents were Jewish, they hung out with only Jewish people, or Syrian, you had Syrian friends. But today, you find people that are more open to integrating with other people that maybe they're not so tied to. In that kind of way, it is. There is a dramatic way that we all, I think, try to raise our children today versus the way we were raised.
Like, your parents would never have talked about their relationship with their parents.
No.
Right? I mean, mine didn't.
No, and I think that's the interesting thing about this book, right? It's like, it's the mob, it's the music, it's the club, but it's also like this kind of unflinching look at this generation of people in a brutally honest way. It's not the PG-13 candy-coated American dream. It's the cost you had to pay to make a shit ton of money in the 60s and 70s and the trade-offs that come with that.
That's right.
And it's not easy to read.
And I remember when you and I first talked about the book, you talked about it being kind of it's framing the American dream, but it's so much more as well.
It really is.
I mean, it's sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's the American dream. It's the Rust Belt. It's the mob. It's
an immigrant story.
Yeah, it's snapshot of music
a family
in
story.
the 60s and 70s.
Exactly.
We sent it to Charlie Brandt, who wrote I Heard You Paint Houses, which became The Irishman on Netflix, and he graciously wrote a blurb for the book, but in the blurb he said, this story has something in it for everyone, whether you're a music fan, or you're a mob history nerd, or you're just a fan of like all-American badass stories. Like, you will find something in the book to like relate to on a personal level, because there's so many personalities and stories and anecdotes in there that click no matter who you are.
Stephanie Abbajay and Dominic Vaiana, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people, it's being published by University of Toledo Press.
Correct.
And where can people buy the book?
Right now you can buy it from abarintoledo.com, which will take you through the University of Toledo Press, and then it'll be available on Amazon after September 9th.
That's it.
And we go to a local bookstore, but there are none anymore. So
we're working on that.
We're working on that. All right. Thanks so much for being on the Loadout.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us this week. Once again, I'm Aaron Perlett. Thanks to our friends here at the Old Rock House, and of course the two authors of the wonderful book, A Bar in Toledo, Stephanie Abbajay and Dominic Vaiana. Vaiana, it doesn't matter. We just call him Dominic. We'll see you next time.